personalities that have come his way as he was growing up. So I'd like to introduce Stet. Come on up.
Sure, thank you. Thank you. First of all, Toby, I've got none of those stories to tell. I'm going to try something entirely different. So, because usually I tell stories about where I grew up. And first of all, I have to say, is anybody here from Mason County, out by Shelton? Because if you are, I got to change the names of the people I'm talking about. So anyway, so tonight I'm going to tell another story. And this story occurred long, long ago along the north coast of Scotland, where there's a little village where all of the men were fishermen. And in this village, there was this fisherman named Davy. Well, Davy was a fisherman, and he had been since he was a boy. But unlike the other men in the village, Davy was a very poor fisherman because he hated fishing. He hated being on the boats. He hated killing those fish. He hated gutting them. He hated the smell of it. Everything about it he hated. So as you can imagine, Davy was not a very successful fisherman. He never had enough money to buy his own boat, not that he would have wanted one anyway. So he was always looking for work as a deckhand on the boats. And because he wasn't a very competent fisherman, you can believe that he didn't get hired very often. So he and his wife, Maggie, who lived in a wee little cottage down by the shoreline, just had to scrimp along. Well, one day Davy was out on a boat, and being the low man on the totem pole, he was working on the back part of the deck. So the rest of the crew hauled in this big net full of fish and dropped it on the deck, and then went on to throw the net back in the sea from the front end of the boat. Now, Davy's job was to sort through this big pile of fish and take the little fish, throw them overboard because they wanted them to grow up to be bigger fish, right? Well, while he was doing this, out of this big pile of fish, a fish came wiggling up to the top that was huge. Davy looked at it, and he'd seen a lot of fish, and he knew this had to be a mackerel because it had silver and black stripes on it. And that was a mackerel. But this mackerel was at least 4 times bigger than any fish he'd ever seen. And he thought, oh my gosh, I can't kill this magnificent thing. So the captain's not looking and the crew's busy doing something else. I'm just going to slip it over the side of the boat. So he did that, returned it to the sea with a big splash. Well, you know, if you've ever been on a ship in the Navy or anything, the captain knows everything that's happening on that ship, right? I mean, nobody gets away with anything. And that happened in this particular case. So the fish had no more hit the water than the skipper's there screaming at Davy, how can you throw away a good fish? That's money out of my pocket. When we get back to the shore, he said, I'm booting you off of this ship, and you'll never earn another dollar from me or any of my buddies. Well, Davy was pretty dejected, and he had to go on cleaning the fish the rest of the day. Sure enough, they got back to the dock, and the captain grabs him by the scruff of the neck, and he frog marches him off the boat and tells all the other skippers what had happened, gives him a boot, and sends him on his way with no pay for the day. Well, Davy's very dejected, and he thinks, what is he going to tell Maggie? Or was it Molly?
Maggie.
Maggie, there you go, Maggie. What's he going to tell Maggie? See, you'd forgotten already. Anyway, so he's thinking, well, she's a pretty understanding person because he's been married to her for a number of years, and Maggie has finally figured out that Davy's just a little bit slow about some things, and she has lowered her expectations of what to expect from him. So he's walking along this dusty track, going home, trying to figure out how he's going to break this to her. And he doesn't realize until suddenly there's a stranger walking next to him in step with him. And he looks, and this fellow's very tall, long dark coat and everything, keeping step with him. And he thinks, well, that's strange. He's actually leading a black and white cow with a rope around its neck. Now, this is not something he expected to see there at all. And the stranger said to him, well, Davy, you've had kind of a rough day, haven't you? Well, yes, it's been a rather rough day. He said, well, I hate to see the way you're suffering. And he said, you know, if you can't work on a boat, he said, I've got an idea the way you can make some money. Well, this got Davy's interest going a little bit. Well, how could I do that? Well, you see this cow? He said, this magnificent beast gives so much great milk. I mean, she just gives milk, which has got all this cream and everything. He said, you and your wife can sell the milk and make butter out of the cream and earn some good money that way. Well, yes, I would really like to do that, Davy thought, but you know what? I haven't got a penny, a farthing, or what do they call it, to my name to buy that cow. Well, Davy, I've got a deal you cannot refuse. He said, I am going to loan you this cow. You don't have to buy it. I'm going to loan you this cow free and clear for 3 years. You are? Yes, he said, and I'll tell you what. He said, at the end of 3 years, I'm going to come back and I'm just going to simply ask you 3 questions. And if anybody can answer those 3 questions, he said, the cow is yours. Well, that sounds like a great deal. Let's shake on that. Okay, we'll do that. But by the way, what happens if I can't answer those 3 questions? You just take the cow? No, Davy, I take your soul. You do. And at this, Davy looked down and realized this man had hooves for feet, a little bit of horns coming out the side of his head. He said, who are you? I'm the devil. And there was a poof, and the devil disappeared. So Davy's there with the cow wondering, what am I going to do? So he takes the cow home. And of course, when he gets there, as I mentioned, Maggie's understanding that he's a little bit simple in a lot of ways when he explains to her what's happened. She goes, well, you know what? She said, in 3 years, certainly something will happen. We'll be able to answer those questions. So don't worry about it. So she took pails, pots and pans, filled everything with milk. I mean, it was unbelievable how much milk this cow was giving. So they made butter, they made cheese, they started selling it, and they were doing very well. And they saved enough money. They built a little barn for the cow, nice little bed of straw, a lot of good hay. So the cow was really contented with them, and she just kept churning out this milk day after day, week after week, and went on for months. And finally, there was enough money. And Maggie said, you know what? We could actually build a little tea room. I've always wanted a tea room. So they built a tea room, and the locals really loved it, and they were making money hand over fist. And finally, you know, the way time passes and you kind of lose track of what's happening, right? So, you know, how long ago was the pandemic? You know, I sort of forget, 5 years ago, wasn't it? So you know how time kind of speeds by. Well, 3 years sped by, and Davy, of course, not being very sharp, has not been keeping very good track of time. Well, he's in the tea room late one night by himself. Maggie's gone home and he's closing up, but there's one person still left in the tea room. And just before he closes, the door opens up and in walks old Saint Nick himself, you know, the devil. And he says, well, Davy, he said, I'm here. It's been 3 years now. It has. Yes, he said, are you ready to answer my questions? And the man in the corner of the room goes, well, I think those questions can be answered. And that's question number 1. Well, wait a minute. Who are you anyway? And why don't you mind your own business? Well, that's another question. And so, no, I can't mind my own business. Well, Davy, who is this? Well, that's 3 questions. And the man said, actually, he said, I am the king of the fish. He said, Davy saved my life over 3 years ago, and I'm here to return the favor. And so those 3 questions have been answered. Now Davy gets the cow. And at that, the devil stomped his feet on the floor, left a mark on the floor, which if you go to the tea room today, you can still see the mark on the floor. And the devil, in a poof of dust and sparks and flame, was gone. Never saw him again. And that cow has continued to produce milk for Davy and Maggie every day. She never goes dry, and the neighbors love it. And at the end of the story, they lived, I think you can finish this for me. At the end of the story, they lived happily ever after. Thank you. Okay, so Bowen is now going to tell a story, and I won't give a long introduction because we only have 35 minutes. We got about 3 people to tell a story. So Bowen is up here on Zoom. Would you go ahead and start your story, please, Bowen? Thank you.
And so what I would like to do is really acknowledge Anne for her amazing story. Let's all give her a wonderful hand, because thank you so much for sharing that, Anne. We've learned so much, and thank you for sharing your family history. It was fabulous.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Here's my story. Not everybody gets their wish, but there was one man who had his wish granted to him, and that wish was to know what the difference was before about heaven and earth. he wanted to visit heaven and earth before he died because he had heard that you have to be good in order to go to heaven. And if you were bad, you went to hell. So he wanted to know, is it worth it to be good? Is heaven all of everything that people say? He needed to know before he died which place he would go to. And so he got his wish. And the first place that he went to was hell. Ah, this must be the place. And hell was a big, huge room. And the room was full of round tables. And on every table was this amazing feast of the most delicious foods ever. Imagine all of your favorite foods, savory and sweet, hot and cold, all of the aromas of spices and flavors in the air. But in hell, also in the air were moans and cries and gasps and howls of pain, because there was one rule in hell, and that rule you could not overcome. And it was this: every person in hell got chopsticks that were 1 meter long, 3 feet long. And the only way that you could eat in hell was to use these meter-long chopsticks. And so no matter how the people in hell tried, they could not eat the food, and they were starving. Well, they were already dead, so they were suffering for eternity. Oh, it was crazy. People went insane. They became violent. They became so depressed. There was no hope in hell. Everything was just horrible. Well, the man had had enough of hell. He wanted next to go to heaven. So, oh, this must be the place. And heaven was also a huge, spacious room filled with round tables, and on each of the tables was a banquet of the most delicious foods. Oh, the smells, aromas filled the air. Oh, but also filling the air was the sound of laughter and conversation and stories. People in heaven were happy. Each person also had chopsticks that were 1 meter long. And the rule in heaven was also the only way that you could eat the food in heaven was to use these chopsticks. But the people in heaven, they were all doing this. Feeding each other. And in heaven, there was peace and harmony. There was caring and compassion. There was trust. Ah, the man had seen what he needed to see. He went back to earth, and he decided that he was going to spend the rest of his life doing what he had seen in heaven. And that, and because he knew that he was going to do what he saw in heaven instead of hell. Because just think about it. If we did, if we were aware of that and practiced what they do in heaven, then wouldn't it make this place that we live in now the difference between heaven and hell?
Story, great use of slides.
So we're looking forward to Maggie's story. Here we go.
Okay, I have a story that I have told many times before, and it's because I love this story. It's Jack and the Christmas Beans. And Jack was written by, is a retelling of a Jack folktale, and it comes from Anne Shelby, a storyteller from Kentucky. So Jack was poor. And Jack was coming on hard times in his family. Jack lived way, way out in the country. He lived with his mama and his daddy and his two big brothers, Tom and Will. And Jack's daddy has lost his job. His mama didn't have any work and everything. They just didn't have any money, no way to get any. The cow had gone dry, the well had gone dry, and the chickens, seeing as how everything was so down and discouraged, well, the chickens weren't laying any eggs. Mom and Daddy called the three boys together, sat them down at the kitchen table and told them, don't look for Christmas to come to this house, not this year. And Christmas was just a few days away. Well, Tom and Will and Jack, they didn't want to hear that. So they lit into thinking. And they thought long and hard and strong. And they came up with a plan. Well, if Christmas isn't coming here, we're going to go out and get it. We're going to fetch it and haul it back here, said Tom and Will. It's a clever plan, said Jack. Clever and cunning. Well, Daddy said, that's the dumbest plan I ever heard of. You can't do that, boys. Mama said, save your breath. They've got to go try. And right away, she started making journey cakes. Journey cakes are what folks in fairy tales take with them when they go on an adventure. Well, the boys decided they were going to go to bed early, get a good night's sleep, get up early in the morning, get on their trek. But Tom and Will, they had a secret plan. They were going to leave early in the morning and leave Jack at home. And so early the next morning before first light, Tom and Will were up, put their coats on, get their journey cakes out the door and gone, leaving Jack alone, asleep in bed. Now, Tom and Will, they went on walking. They walked and walked. They walked so far. They'd never, ever been that far away from home before, and still they kept on walking. They came upon a man on the side of the road, tall, skinny, thin man, raggedy clothes. And the man stopped him and said, boys, got any food you can give me? I'm just about starved to death. Tom said, we don't have very much food for ourselves. And Will said, and we don't have time to stop and talk. We're out on important business. And they left the man on the side of the road as hungry as he had been. They kept on walking. Pretty soon there was a little woman on the side of the road, just a little raggedy sweater on. And the woman stopped him and said, boys, will you let me wear your coat a bit? I'm just so cold. She was just about blue. She was so cold. The boy said, we don't have time to talk to your old sister. we gotta get going. And we don't have nothing but our own coats. They left the woman on the side of the road shivering. They kept on walking, and the sun went down and it came cold. Now, they came to a wilderness place, a dark place, no houses, no lights. And well, they were just shivering with cold. They'd already eaten up all their journey cakes. They were cold and hungry, and it was a long way. They were tired, and they were having second thoughts about getting to the North Pole. And then they heard something. They heard something. They could tell it was coming, something big. And then they could see this some kind of big white. What was it? They didn't know. Their eyes just got so big. They turned tail, started screaming, crying, running. They ran all the way back home, all the way back up to the steps, in the house, down the hall, jumped in their beds and covered up their heads with their covers. The next morning was the day before Christmas, and Jack got up, said goodbye to Mom and Daddy, took his journey cakes, put on his old coat, and walked out the door, heading for the North Pole. Now he walked on, walked on, walked on, walked so far. He'd never ever been that far away from home before, and still he kept going. And then he came upon that old man that was so hungry. And the man said, "Oh, would you stop and share something with me? I'm just so..." "Oh, sure," said Jack. "I don't have much, but you're welcome to it." Jack pulled out the journey cakes, and he and the man sat down and ate, and they talked, and they started telling jokes like Brett here at the beginning, and they laughed, and they started telling stories, and they laughed. They had a good old time. And then the man said, "Jack, you've been so good to me. I want to give you a present." He reached in his pants pocket and pulled out 3 bean seeds. Give them to Jack. And Jack said, "Well, thank you." And the man, he said, "Now, Jack, those are magic beans." Jack said, "Oh, I can't wait." And the man said, "Just plant one, Jack, and you'll see." And so Jack, he dug a little hole in the ground, planted the seed, and up from the ground came this beautiful Christmas tree. It was a Christmas tree with lights on it, decorations and ornaments, and then presents started growing on the tree, getting bigger and bigger, and they just plopped gently on the ground. And Jack and the man opened the presents and played with them and had a high old time. Well, Jack said, "I've got to get going. I'm heading to the North Pole." And he said goodbye to the man, and Jack went on his way. Walked on, walked on. He came upon that old woman in the raggedy sweater. She had an empty basket under her arm, and the old woman called out, "Oh, Jack, won't you let me wear your coat a minute? I'm so..." "Oh, sure," said Jack, and he put the coat around the woman's shoulders, and they started talking and laughing and telling stories and singing songs even. And then Jack said, "Well, let's even dance." And they danced right there in the middle of the road. They had such a good time. And the woman said, "Jack, you've been so good. I want to give you a present." And she gave him the empty basket. He said, "Well, thank you." And she said, "Jack, that's a magic basket." "Magic," he said. She said, "You just hold that basket and say, 'Fill, basket, fill.'" Jack did. He did. He called out, "Fill, basket, fill." And all kind of good food started coming out of the basket. A roast turkey and a ham and all kind of pies and all kind of cakes and biscuits and cornbread, all with butter. Oh, man, it was so good, all that food. And they had a feast. And the old woman and Jack, they had themselves a spoon. Well, then Jack said, "Oh, I've got to get on the road. I'm supposed to head down the road to the North Pole." And he said goodbye, and he kept on walking. Well, he walked on and walked on, and he got to this wilderness place. It was cold. It was dark. Wasn't no houses and lights. And then he saw something coming. It was big. He could hear it. It was big and white. Well, his eyes got big and he couldn't wait to see what it was. He started going faster. He was so eager. And he'd get up there, and what do you suppose it was? Big white bear. You can't believe it, but it was a bear, and it was a talking bear. And it said, Jack, it knew his name even, and it said, Jack, how about spending Christmas Eve with me? And Jack said, here I am, let's go. And so the two of them went up the mountain to the bear's cave, and they had themselves such a good time. Oh, they talked and they told jokes and they told stories and they sang songs. And then Jack said, let me plant this tree. And he planted the seed. Up came the Christmas tree. They played with the presents. And then Jack said, watch this, bear. Said, fill, basket, fill. Food came out. They had a feast. They had themselves a time. And then they went out of the cave and they looked up at the stars. It was a sparkling night, beautiful sparkling stars up there. And Jack was thinking, the stars look so close, I could almost touch them. Well, Jack thought it, but the bear did. He reached his arm up and grabbed a star and gave it to Jack for a present. And Jack took it. And then the bear said, Jack, now we've had such a good time, but you know, it's almost Christmas morning. Your mama and daddy and your two brothers, they'll be looking for you. They'll miss you if you're not there. Jack said, that's right. I guess I better get on home. Bear said, you just wait a minute. Get up on my back. I can fly you down there. And that's what he did. Got on the bear's back. Bear took off flying right over the treetops, right up to Jack's house. Jack got off, said goodbye to the bear, went in the house, and Mom and Daddy were so glad to see him. All boys under the same roof. They were all happy. But Jack and Tom and Will, they weren't so forgiving. Did you bring Christmas, Jack? They said. He winked at him, took the basket, put it on the table, said, fill, basket, fill, and all this food came out. Mom and Daddy were so happy. Still, Tom and Will weren't that impressed. Where's the presents, Jack? He pulled them outside, dug a hole, planted the bean seed. Here come the Christmas tree, all beautiful, decorated, and presents. And Tom and Will, they had such a fun time. Opened the presents, they played and played. Everybody had a good time. And Jack, he went outside, looked around, and he had that star the bear had given him. He had everything he needed and more, and he was well satisfied. Things don't always come just as you plan them, and you don't always find a thing in the first place you think to look. But Jack, he had found Christmas. He went out and got it, and he brought Christmas back home.
Thank you, Maggie. We've missed your Jack stories over the last couple of months, so glad you're back. So we have time for one more story. I think John's going to give us a little story. I don't know if it's going to be about the Star Hill Gang tonight or
No, a little different.
a little bit different. Okay. Here's for a surprise.
I learned early in life that embarrassment makes your character. I didn't know that I was going to do it up into my 40s. So this is a story about a sale that didn't go in Christmas. Now, I had a few businesses in the late 70s and early 80s. I delivered heating fuel, stuff like that. Now, my best friend was head of maintenance for Standard Oil. Now, Standard Oil changed the way they did business. They got rid of all their land, all their bulk plants, and changed their name to Chevron. So he was out of a job. Now, individuals, corporations bought these bulk plants, you call them, but they didn't have anybody to do maintenance. Now, you can't go call a plumber or a welder because gasoline, explodes. So we made a company and we started working. Now, we hired a guy to work with him, and I'd come over and help once in a while. I'd clean tanks. What I mean by cleaning tanks is you have to go inside the tank. In the lower 48, you have vacuum trucks. They just set a hose in and clean it all out. And it's neat. Up there, there's no roads, so we got to go in with a 5-gallon bucket, squeegee, and a shovel. And of course, we have protective gear and supplied oxygen. And then he goes in and welds inside a gas tank. So it had to be pretty clean. Now, just about that time, the government says, we got to change all the tanks in the service stations. They are metal tanks and they're leaking, and all the plumbing is leaking. Every tank in the United States had to be changed. Well, that was good for us. We were in business. We opened an office in Anchorage. We were doing good. We went from busy to boom. We were work rich and cash poor. But the problem was, I was getting scared because we didn't have money. We had work. So I decided we better sell this business. So I put word out. There was an outfit out of Seattle that was going around and buying these mom and pop businesses like ours. And I got hold of them. They came up, looked at my books, and talked to us and seen what we'd done. And they said, John, the CEO would like to meet with you. And I said, oh, great. So he gives it I go home and throw a toothbrush and clean underwear in my pack and put it on my back, meet at the airport. We go to Seattle. We get off the plane in Seattle and he gives me instructions to go to some place called Issaquah. That's where their office is. Okay, got to be there at 9. Okay, now he shakes my hand. He says, John, these men wear suits and ties. I'm not telling you to go out and wear a suit and tie and buy one. I'd just like you to go buy a new shirt and a pair of pants. Well, I thought that was something. I would rather have all my teeth pulled in my mouth without Novocaine than go shopping for clothes. But I knew a lady in Seattle, so I called her and she said, I can spare an hour. Meet me at Macy's at South Center. I said, okay. So we went there. 1 hour, we bought 3 things: a shirt, pair of pants, and socks. 1 hour. I could have filled up my truck with tools. The next morning, I show up at Issaquah at 8:30. It was a little early. I met the CFO, then I met a vice president and his assistant, and vice president and his assistant. And then all of a sudden, this door swings open, and the CEO comes in. And it was just like mosquitoes on a fresh, bloody piece of meat. Whoom, they swarmed on this guy. They were peeling his shirt. Oh my goodness, what kind of material is that? What is that? Is it from Italy? How much did it cost? Not one of them damn people said anything about my new shirt and my new pants. They were all worried about this suit. Well, 2 hours later, we had a break. I'm standing there. And the guy that went to judo come over and shook my hand and says, John, you look good. Could you do me a favor? I said, sure. Could you go in the men's room and take off the labels? I said, okay, but I didn't think much of it. Now I walked into the bathroom at 5'8", and I looked for labels. I looked 1 inch wide, 12 inches long, yellow and red lights blinking, large. And I looked around my pants, and right back here is the same thing. 34 by 30. Not one time it says it, but 12 times. Oh, I walked out of that bathroom at 2'8". My feet were moving, and I felt like I was wearing flippers. Got through the day, met the gal back at motel because I was taking her to dinner. And I was telling her about this. So she's sitting on the bed laughing. I says, I got to get the shirt off. This is ridiculous. But I took my shirt off and she started laughing. Tears were rolling down her eyes. She's laughing and she's pointing at me. Now, I don't have a Charles Atlas body, but that's nothing to laugh at. She finally walks over and points right here. Look in the mirror. And there's a little white tag, round one that says inspected by 30. Well, I kind of laughed. Now, I didn't make the sale that day, but I did pass inspection. And, you know, I got to thinking, it's Christmas. And you really don't need money for Christmas. You just need a bad enough story where your friends will always remind you about it. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Thank you, John. Well, you know what I'll always think about at Christmas, of course. That'll be stuck in my mind. So Ann, are you still there? We'd like to call you back on stage if you would, please. Brett, we'll pull you up, I think. Is Ann still there?
Yes, Anna's still there.
Okay, there you go. You're on, Ann.
Hey, Anne, we appreciate so much your incredible presentation because a lot of work and love must have gone into organizing this. I don't know how many years you've spent on this, and you probably still are doing research on it. It was magnificent. And the expression of the audience, because I know it's difficult for you to see on that little screen, it was expression of, oh my gosh, or how could this have happened? And I have a lot of questions, kind of expression. So from South Sound Story Guild, Anne, thank you very much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me. Thank you all.
It was enlightening.
It was very enlightening, as you said. So I think it's been a great night for storytelling, and I hope you will all come again. I think on January 11th, I believe.
14.
14th? Where's my?
January 14th.
January 14th, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so
And Regina.
Oh, yeah, Regina.
Regina's promises still a storyteller? Okay, good. So I'd like you all to look at southsoundstory.org, or not South Sound Storytelling, southsoundstory.org. Look at the upgrades that Mitch has done to that website because you can find all the events and also some of the workshops. If maybe you might want to do a little bit of that. And your support is appreciated. You can donate online or just throw money in the hat. I promise I won't be spending it on pizza tonight. And Fanning the Embers is coming up March 27th to 29th, which is sort of a big event for the South Sound Story, which is held up on Hood Canal, 2 days, great food, great fun, a lot of good people. And the registration opens on January 5th. Again, you can see that on the website. So is there anything else we need to talk about? Okay, with that, good night. Thank you and Godspeed.
Thank you, Stet.
Oh, you're welcome. That's like, you still want to see.
Yeah.